Welcome back. Today we are going to continue our study of the classical era by learning about the life and music of Joseph Boulogne and why so few people, even in the music world, are familiar with him. We'll also study Beethoven and answer at least 7 out of 10 questions, hopefully correctly, in a review quiz of his life and music. So, a lot of people, even non musicians, non classical music lovers, have heard of people like Mozart, like Beethoven, Bach. A name that is not as well known is Joseph Boulogne. He was the son of a wealthy French planter and nobleman, and an Afro Caribbean mother who was an enslaved woman working in the plantation in the Caribbean. So Boulogne was of mixed race. The term that mixed race people were given at the time is mulatto. And so throughout his life, he experienced a lot of racism and difficulties getting work and jobs and even just having romantic relationships because of his race. The dates are a little bit uncertain, but probably between the ages of 7 and 10, he was moved to Paris by his father. He was educated there and excelled in both music and fencing. So if you're not familiar with fencing, it's sword play. You're learning how to duel with rapiers and all that fun stuff. It's still a sport today, and it was taken very seriously back at this time as well. So he was well known not even just in France as a master swordsman, but even as far away as the fledgling United States. We don't know a lot about his early musical training, but he studied violin and developed a superb facility and technique on that instrument, and he also began writing music at a young age. He was given the title Chevalier de Saint-Georges, which basically a chevalier was the French version of a knight. So in England, you have the knighthood. In France, you can become a chevalier. He landed a job as the concert master or the lead violinist of the Concert des Amateurs, which is, we think of amateur today as someone who kind of is learning a skill or is interested in a skill, but is not very good at it. It really has a different meaning in this context. These were not people kind of just pretending to be good at music. They were very gifted. And this was a really well-known, well-respected orchestra. So Boulogne succeeded the Gosek as conductor. He stepped down, moved on to some other post, and gave Boulogne the post. And as conductor, he continued to go on to do really great things with this group. Later on, his academy appointment was stymied because of his race. There was also a situation where he could have become the opera director, I think for the Paris Opera, but several of the sopranos who sang there objected to having an opera director of mixed race. Some of his important musical contributions are the concertante genre, the symphony concertante. So this was a new genre that he and a few other French composers created. We studied the concerto and the concerto grosso from the Baroque era. So this genre is the classical version of a concerto grosso. Boulogne was a favorite of Queen Marie Antoinette. He worked in the royal court for a time. In 1778, he stayed in the same house as Mozart when Mozart was visiting France. So they probably met. They probably were familiar with each other's work. There is speculation that Mozart was quite jealous of Boulogne because of his favor from Marie Antoinette, because of how well he was doing with his work at the time, the attention he was receiving. Because remember, Mozart was kind of struggling around this time. Boulogne premiered Haydn's Paris symphonies and the Concert Spiritual series. I think I just said that completely wrong. And then at one point, because of the unrest and craziness happening with the American Revolution, in which France was involved, supporting the colonies against Britain, the Amateurs was disbanded, but he went on to form and to lead the Concert de la Loge Olympique. He took a hiatus from music to fight in the French Revolution. There was a misunderstanding at one point. He was imprisoned for a year during the Reign of Terror. He was the rank of colonel at this time. He was later acquitted, but that was a horrible situation to be in for him. And he died at the age of, I think, 53. In 1799. So he contributed really wonderful things for repertoire, classical repertoire, especially for violinists, and was a very well-known and respected performer and conductor as well. But as seems to happen just so often, because of his descent, his race, being a black man in a very white world, his name, his fame, his work has been largely forgotten and almost erased. So we're going to listen to, because we want to not let that continue to happen, we're going to listen to his one of his string quartets. This is playlist number 4. And actually, nope, this is correct. So a string quartet is a type of chamber music. Chamber music is a small collection of musicians, usually 2 to maybe 5 or 6 people. It's perfect for smaller venues and intimate settings where you don't need a really large group, a large orchestra to carry the sound. Typically, a string quartet is 2 violins, 1 viola, and 1 cello. Now, something that's very fascinating and beautiful in this particular quartet is that the cello and the viola have opportunities to carry the melody. A lot of string quartets give melody almost exclusively to the violins, primarily the first violinist. Sometimes the cello is just playing a bass line all the way through, and I'm sure that is boring as all get out for the poor cellists. Same thing for violas. So I would like you to pay special attention to the times when the viola and the cello are playing this kind of the solo, the melodic part. Boulogne gives equal work to all four instruments to create this balanced conversation. I would like you to notice the primary texture and what kind of contrasts keep your interest. Is it easy to watch this at least the first movement of this all the way through? Do you find your mind wandering? What do you find that is interesting to watch and to listen to? Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Almost right off the bat, we hear a cello solo around the 25-second mark. The primary texture is homophony, which is to be expected in classical music. There are moments that are more polyphonic, but homophonic texture is most prevalent here. I have given you some additional listening in the playlist as well, so you can check out more work by Joseph Bologne as well as Mozart. And our final composer from this era, Ludwig van Beethoven. Okay, so he had a difficult home life. His father was an abusive alcoholic, and Beethoven really had to help raise his younger brothers. He was born in 1770 in Bonn, Germany. He was an adept keyboard player, also played the violin. There are stories that say he was beaten by his father to practice. And if that is true, it's a wonder that he stuck with music and made that his livelihood. His first appointment was as a court musician in Bonn, but he moved to Vienna in 1792 because Vienna was the hub for music and culture. It was where everyone who wanted to be anyone, who was anyone, needed to be. For a time, he studied with Haydn, who was an older, very respected composer. He met a lot of people and gained influential patrons who were able to support him throughout his life. Sadly, Beethoven began losing his hearing and was progressively more deaf after about the age 30. In 1802, he wrote a letter from Heiligenstadt, Germany, to his brothers. And in this letter, which I do not believe was ever sent, he wrote all about his experience with losing his hearing. I actually will link this letter in D2L so you can go in and read it if you would like. But he is explaining why his personality and his mood has changed so much. He's telling them it's not because I don't like to be around people. It's not because I want to be angry. It's because I literally cannot hear. So being around people is just really difficult for me. He explained wanting to take his own life because the thought of being a musician and not being able to hear was just insupportable and excruciatingly painful for him. And then he goes on to explain how he gradually made it to a place where he felt he could keep living because he felt he had more to offer in with his music. He had more work to do, more music that he felt was in him that he needed to produce. He also felt a great responsibility towards his brothers and did not want to desert them and leave them alone. So it's a really good thing to read just to get a better understanding of Beethoven. Probably because of his hearing loss, he had a very unsettled nomadic life, moving from place to place, trying to find places to rent. He did not perform as much when his hearing got bad, but he was composing at a furious rate constantly. He never married, but he did fall in love several times, and there are letters we have from him addressed to uh, his beloved. At one point, he fell in love with a married woman, and then she eventually moved out of the city, and he lost touch with her. But he ended up adopting his nephew, Carl, when his brother died, and the battle was between the custody battle was between his sister-in-law and Beethoven, and Beethoven felt like she wasn't fit to raise him, so he won custody, smothered his nephew with love, and he I think had some gambling debts, was in trouble of some sort, and tried to kill himself unsuccessfully. After that point, though, Beethoven's health really spiraled downward. He died when he was 56, and his funeral was attended by 20,000 people. So that just shows how much he was loved and respected and how much he would be missed. Okay, so what kind of music did he write? Compared to Haydn, who wrote over 100 symphonies, he did live longer. It's true, but still, Beethoven only wrote 9 symphonies, 32 piano sonatas, 16 string quartets, 1 mass, only 1 violin concerto, 5 piano concertos, 1 opera, and some other kind of incidental, music. So he did not write as many compositions as most other classical composers. There's possible reasons for that. I think one of the most likely is his extreme perfectionism. He wanted to only release music, publish things, perform things after they had been edited to its best form. He did not want it to sound unfinished or unpolished. So his manuscripts show things that were erased or edited and changed multiple times before it was ready for public consumption. His music is divided into 3 stylistic periods. As you can see here, his early music is kind of the typical light classical style, similar to that of Haydn and Mozart. It's very elegant and proper and kind of restrained in its emotionality. His second period has an element of heroism and hopefulness and idealism. He even dedicated his Third Symphony to Napoleon Bonaparte. And then when Bonaparte crowned himself emperor, setting himself up on this pedestal, not being one of the people, Beethoven was very upset and erased that dedication. His third period music is more introspective. It's very thoughtful, and it's also retrospective. Sometimes it is imitating the textures and styles of Johann Sebastian Bach. He breaks away from formal restraint and adds extra movements to string quartets, things like that. It's very emotionally expressive. A lot of his music sounds like it is a stream of consciousness novel where you're just talking and you're saying these things as they come to mind, and then you kind of pause and reflect, and then you continue on with your next thought. It just has that very free, almost floating feel to it. There are abrupt contrasts in texture as well, almost like your thought was interrupted, and then you think about something else. Beethoven reimagined the symphony in 3 primary ways, kind of reinvigorated it, and led us into the Romantic era. So here are his three things. The first is rhythmic drive. We hear in his symphonies this very energetic, pulsating rhythmic style. He uses a lot of accents and repetitive rhythms. He is not concerned with elegance and wit and sophistication. It's almost as if there's a message he's just trying to get across, and he will do so by any means necessary. He just chooses to use this rhythmic drive. Another characteristic is motivic consistency. This is when he takes a single idea. It can be a rhythm or a melody, and he grows a composition from this really tiny little seedling of an idea. He does this through repetition and taking this small motive and changing it to different forms to fit situations. So we'll see this in action in just a moment. Psychological progression. Some of his music at least seems to tell a coherent story from beginning to end. And there is a lot of room for debate and interpretation on this particular point. But his Symphony No. 5, which we're going to look at, is an example of a composition that does seem to tell a struggle, a story about a struggle with your fate. And are you going to be drawn and dragged down into this kind of pit that is being forced upon you, or are you going to triumph over that and win out in the end? His Symphony No. 5, the first movement is in sonata form, and this will be playlist 7. We are going to hear motivic consistency in this movement, and I would like you to go ahead and listen to the first movement, and I think you'll know right away what the motive is. You'll hear it in the first theme and the bridge, faintly in the second theme if you listen really closely. It's repeated in the cadence theme. It is used in the development and in the coda, and it creates this sense of urgency and tenacity. So I'm not going to tell you what that theme is. I will tell you that it's very short, and it is just repeated almost without stop in movement 1. So go ahead and listen to that movement, and then we'll resume here.